Hello there, thanks for joining me everyone. Now I just want to have a quick talk about two programs on your XP Deus menu. We call them the Pro programs. First of all, you've got program number 6, which is Deep, and then you've got program number 9, which is Hot. Now these programs take a little bit of basic understanding of the Deus to get the most out of them. So that's what this video is all about. We're just going to talk quickly about these two programs. Let's start with program number 6, the Deep program on your XP Deus menu. It's a factory preset. Straight away you'll notice there's a slight difference because the Deep program uses a two-tone audio compared to the Deus Fast and the Gold Max Power, which uses a three-tone audio. Why two-tone? Well, we think a two-tone audio will give you a better target ID between ferrous and non-ferrous at depth, and also it's a lot easier to use and understand. Going on to the ground balance. Now the ground balance is slightly different on the Deep program. It defaults at 88 rather than the conventional 90. This is to just lift the ground a little bit more, add into this bit of extra depth. Now a lot of the depth on this program comes from internal filtering, which is not an adjustment you can make. This is within the machine. So what are the pitfalls with using the Deep program? Now I wanted to call these pitfalls, but they're not really pitfalls, they're misunderstandings. If I have someone coming up to me in the field or sending me an email to say my XP Deus is a little bit unstable, it's a little bit erratic, what am I doing wrong? 9 times out of 10 these guys are using the Deep program and their field won't allow it. You need to understand that the Deep program is a powerful program. You can't just use it on any site. And your machine will tell you if you're using the wrong program, because if you're in Deep and the machine becomes unstable and spitty and poppy, it's probably a good indication you should choose another program or make some adjustments within the Deep program. So let's have a quick look at the Deep program menu. First of all, let's start off with sensitivity, preset 90. Down, frequency, that's using a low frequency as you can see there if you're using the black coil. Iron volume 3, we're not going to bother with that. Reactivity, now this is an important one when it comes to depth. This is using reactivity 2, which is quite low. It's a slow reactivity, giving you better punch in the ground. And this is one of the reasons why your machine might be a little bit unstable if using the Deep program. Audio response 4, this is reasonably high, which is going to give your small or deep targets a bit of an audio lift, a bit more punch to the audio. Notch, we're not going to bother doing that. And we're on disc, which is 5.5, slightly lower than your conventional Gold Max Power, Deus Fast, etc. But I just want to talk to you about a couple of adjustments you might want to make if your Deep program is a little bit erratic. For sure, if the Deep program works fine out in your field, you don't need to adjust anything, you're good to go. The adjustments I suggest making to calm the Deep program down is firstly go into sensitivity. If you're using the black coil, go into expert and then you'll see TX power, and that defaults at 3. You might just want to drop that down to 2 or even 1 just to make that machine a little bit more settled. And then I'll go down to reactivity. You've got reactivity 2 there as we talked about. Just bump it up 1 or 2 notches. 2.5 is a good all-rounder, or even 3. And you might find that this settles the Deep program on your field. But the Deep program's internal filtering does make it a little bit cracky, a little bit spitty on iron, whereas other programs may be a bit quiet on iron. So just bear that in mind when you're using the Deep program. So now we come to the question, when would I use the Deep program? Personally, well, obviously if my field conditions would allow me using the Deep program with a smooth operation, I'd use it then. But also I'd use a Deep program if there was a little patch where I knew there was some good finds to be had. Perhaps finds have been made there in the past and you want to go and hoover up. I'd use it then to get the last of the treasure and put up with a little bit of spitting and popping, but you know you're working the machine on the edge when you're getting this sort of feedback. So that's my little talk about program number 6, Deep. Let's have a talk about program number 9, Hot. Now we're on the Hot program. Now this is different in many ways compared to your Deep program. For a start, the audio is completely different. This uses an audio called full tones. Now what full tones actually does is it gives you an audio response on a sliding scale. So your low conductive targets such as iron, the ground, coke, foil give a low tone, whereas your higher conductive targets give a high tone. This is particularly good when you're searching parks or something like that, when you want to cherry pick just the high conductive targets. We've got a lot of good feedback from the USA where they're looking for the big silver American coins. The hot program sings out nice and high on these particular targets. Also, going into the menu, we're using a disc at -6.4. Now this is one of the few programs we can run a completely open discrimination and still hear the iron. So why are we using a -6.4 discrimination? Well, it's because we want to hear everything, including the ground. So we've got the ground, we've got iron, we've got mid conductors by the mid tone, high conductors by the high tone. We've got all this information coming in. Now, if you didn't want to hear the ground, for example, all you do is turn the discrimination up to -2, something like that, and then you'll cut out the ground feedback. But for the professional detectorist, this is a brilliant program because you get an audio picture of the ground. You can hear when the ground changes, and you can hear when you're walking over an iron contaminated area. So let's have a quick look at the hot program menu. First of all, sensitivity. Going down to frequency, now you can see there that the hot program uses a higher frequency compared to the deep program. Let's go back down, iron volume, well, we don't need that because we've got our own iron tone within the full tones. Reactivity, we're a little bit faster, we're at reactivity 3, which is telling us this program is going to be good amongst iron and several targets close to each other. Audio response is set at 3, which gives you a really good perception of size and depth. A deep target or a small target will give a quieter sound compared to a large, shallow target. We've got lots of videos on these subjects back in the XP archives. Notch, we're not interested in that, but we have got a video on notch. I'll put a link up below. Discrimination, there we go, 6.4. And to get to the tones, you just go into the discrimination menu, press expert, and you'll see all the tones there. You've got 2 tones, full tones, pitch. You've got a wide range of tones you can adjust, but because this is an open discrimination, full tones, as I said earlier, works absolutely perfectly. And we're back into the detect screen. And here we've got the XY screen, which I haven't really talked about the XY screen much, but this gives you a really good indication of your target. If you get a dead straight line, it's very often a good target such as a coin or a pure metal. If you get a disruptive line, it's quite often iron or something you don't want. So what are the pitfalls with using the hot program? Well, if you're new to detecting or new to the Deus, you may perceive all this feedback as noise, and you may say this program is too noisy for you. It's not noise, it's actual feedback. So once you learn to take this feedback on board, you begin to work as one with the machine. But apart from that, there's no other pitfalls using a hot program. You either love it or hate it. Personally, it's one of my favorites. One of its advantages is the feedback. For example, if you're on a new site and you don't know much about it, you can use a hot program to get this audio picture of what's going on, and you can quickly identify the areas of high ground mineralisation or iron. And as we know, this is very often where the good finds are made. But with all these programs, we really do encourage you to make your own adjustments and get a feel for the Deus and find the best program that suits you. We quite often hear people say, oh well, I like the hot program, but it isn't that deep. Well, that's simply down to adjustments, just because it isn't adjusted like the deep program. Now, if you want a deep hot program, all you have to do is use the deep program as a platform. So you're using the deep filters, put the hot settings into the deep program and save it, and then you've got a deep hot program. We really do encourage you guys to go out there and have a little play with your Deus. If you make some adjustments to a program, a factory program, and you're a little bit worried you've messed things up, just turn it off and on again, and every time it will revert back to the factory presets. The only way you can keep your custom program in that menu is by saving it. So don't be frightened to make a few adjustments when you're out in the field. Okay, this video is getting a bit long now, But with all that said and done, I just want to get quickly out into the field and just let you hear what the deep and the hot programs sound like. It's a little bit muddy over there. I'm not going to go over there. We've got some stubble over this side, so let's go. As you can see, that is clearly an iron sound because we've got the line going this way. If it was a non-ferrous target, the line would be going this way. So this iron sound, let's go into the deep program and see what it sounds like. Here we go, deep program. We're still getting a similar visual information, but can you hear the deep program is letting that iron crack through a little bit because it is a punchy program. Now that is a textbook signal. I'll let you look at the screen. Coming up at 82 and it's got a dead straight line. Pinpointing is an absolute doddle on the XP. As we said many times before, really short wiggles, really short ones. Draw the coil back at the same time, and when the target disappears, it's right under that XP logo. It's on the nose of the coil. Here we go again. Draw it back under the nose. That's a nice solid sound. Dig them all day. Ah, there it is, look. It just looks like a very worn Victorian coin or something like that. But listen to that sound. That is absolutely lovely. And that's using the hot program. Here's an interesting one. It's got sort of a squelchy signal. I don't think that's iron because it's just slightly above the iron tone. Can you hear that's trying to come through a little bit? Let's go on to the deep program, see what that sounds like. Number 6 deep. Do you know what? I think personally there's a non-ferrous target there very close to some iron. But it could also be deep because when a target gets out of depth range or almost out of depth range, the ground starts to consume the signal and the target will turn to iron eventually. So it could be just on that fringe depth. Here we go, let's have a look at the screen. We're getting a sort of an iron loop. But it's, yeah, you see I'm getting the numbers. These are the targets we should really be investigating. Back to the hot program. See, I'm getting a positive number, but it's slightly out of range for the meter to make a calculated decision. Well, as we said so many times before, the spade is our best discriminator. Let's have a look. But before I dig this target out, it might be worth pointing out that not all highly conductive targets are big. Some very, very small targets can also be highly conductive. It depends on what sort of metal they're made up from. Once again, if you can pinpoint it easily, you're in with a chance. it's out, and it is a low conductor. Just have a look at that meter reading now it's out. Onto the deep program. Here we go. Nice and clean. That two-tone really sorts it out. What is it? Well, we know it's non-ferrous anyway. It's a, well, I'm guessing it's a coin or some sort of a token, but again, it's not a high conductive target. It's, I'd say, a mid-range conductive target. Well guys, I hope that's given you a little insight into the Deep and Hot Pro programs, and given you a little bit of incentive there to go out and make your own adjustments to suit your field. But until then, be lucky, and we'll see you on the next one.